Thank you, Anna. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being with us. I want to comment on one of the points mentioned by Anna. Since our webinar is going to be in Arabic today, so you don't need actually to do or to use the interpretation button, because generally the webinar is going to be using Arabic, but I will speak quickly about some of the rules. We will give different presentations from speakers. His voice is being interrupted, but after the presentations, we will open the door for discussion, questions and answers. So for everybody to be able to participate, you can open your mics. As I can see it now, all of you are muted almost, but to make sure that you would be able to participate, you can click the button participants. So if you click it, you will have at the right of the screen, at the bottom, there's a button called raise hand. So if you use it, we will know that you want to participate in the session specified for questions and answers. I think now it's time we start our session. Thank you, Ms. Ala. Thank you, Osama. Thank you. Before we start the discussions, we just want to remind you for the maximum benefit of this webinar, it's going to be recorded so we can share it with other people who couldn't make it for this webinar. So the presentations would be available for you after this webinar. Also, for participation and delivering questions or comments, it's going to be just like mentioned after the interventions. So we would have more interactions with all the presentations that are going to be given by the two speakers. So today we will know about the Jordanian experience in tackling this topic at the time of Corona, because it affected the electoral process. And what we need to know about the Jordanian experience is that there was a royal declaration that elections is going to be conducted during this period, but it was impacted by this crisis. So we are going to know by the two speakers how they dealt with this crisis, about the timings, the time schedule, also the legal framework, and also the information, voter information and awareness. We will have Mr. Nasser Al-Habashna, the Director of Directorate of Operations, Electoral Operations in the IEC, Jordanian IEC, and he holds the master's degree in management. He worked in the Ministry of Interior in the respect of human rights and also building the capacities of the staff of the ministry. And in 2009, he started working with the International Organization for the Electoral Assistance. He's specialized in capacity building, and then he worked as a specialist in the electoral processes, and he was adapted as a trainer. He was accredited as a trainer in Bridge, and in 2016 he started working with the IAC as a head of the institution. So we welcome Mr. Nasser. We are honored to have him with us today. The other speaker is going to be Mr. Sharafuddin Abu Ruman, and he's the Director of Media and Communication at IAC in Jordan. and he's also a Jordanian journalist and a media person. He worked at IAC since its establishment in 2012. He designed and implemented a lot of media plans and information plans, and those plans were very much welcomed. And he's also a member of the steering committee for the committee for the women committee for elections, and he's also my colleague in this committee, and I'm honored to have him with us today. So I give the floor to Mr. Nasser to give his intervention in 30 minutes. And after that, we will remind you again about the rules for interacting and giving questions. So please, if you deliver it written, and to follow up the intervention so that you would be able to intervene later on. Yes, Mr. Nasser, the floor is yours. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for this introduction. Actually, allow me in the beginning to welcome you all in this good and fruitful meeting, actually. And I would like to welcome you on behalf of His Excellency, Mr. Khalid Kalalja, Director of the IAC, and also the General Secretariat, and also my colleague, Sharif Roman. What makes us comfortable here is that most of people presented in this webinar know the Jordanian IAC and knows some of its details and its techniques. So this make what we want to talk is only about what procedures were taken. Thank you for inviting us to talk about our procedures, our measures taken to conduct elections in COVID-19 time. We at IAC, we take into consideration the electoral cycle after, or we start working on the electoral process after each elections, and we start planning, and then we go into the implementation phase, and after that, the evaluation. This circle of elections in Jordan, sorry, each 4 years we conduct elections according to constitution, and this allows us to work early enough on the procedures and the plans for elections in 2020. It started early enough and very soon after the previous elections, but with such conditions of the crisis, we started Corona shed its implications on our preparations, and this made us reconsider most of our measures and the processes. In the first phase of preparation, we prepare the plan for the needs and necessities, which include the human resources that we need in the electoral process. And also within the plan, we have some logistics of the electoral process and with all its details. All these items of the plan were reviewed with such conditions of the pandemic, so we can adapt all these details. I will talk about them item by item. So in the end, we would know how it was reflected in some of the details, and even the financials, how they were affected. So in each process or in each stage, I would like to mention all the technical measures that were taken so that we would be able to conduct elections in the pandemic. The basic things that we worked on, the voters lists and preparing them and distributing them and receiving any objections. After that, we talk about the training of the personnel. After that, we will talk about the nomination process, and then later on, the procedures on the day. If I start talking about the voters list, everybody may know that the voters registration is automatic. So all those that are legally accredited to vote will be registered as voters, and we ask the civil status department to have the lists of legal voters and eligible voters, and we start working on these lists and to add or to omit according to the legal conditions that are related to the voters list. The first procedure we took in this respect is to have this voters lists finalized. So we took the methodology of the automatic registration, and the communication with the voters by this will be only about maintaining the security and the safety of the workers in this respect, and the communication is going to be between the IEC and the civil status directorate, and we only have by this maintaining the safety for the workers on this respect, in this respect, within a safe environment, and we provide them with all they need to be safe in such a pandemic conditions. Like, for example, preparing or providing gloves and masks for them, and they wouldn't get infected in such conditions. After preparing the voters lists, we present these lists. And now we're presenting these lists is the first stage in which we may have a contact between voters and the IEC staff. In 2016, we distributed the voters lists in 38 location almost. So in this year, we will have some areas or locations that are going to be presented for these lists to be presented. But we would also present these lists online, and each voter can examine these lists. And in each constituency separately, they will be provided on the electronic site. It's a voter login to the search engine. They can log in the site of the IEC, and they can examine their or search for the names. And the presentation is going to be on the electronic website. And we had like almost 52 or 53 that are going to have the paper lists. And in addition to the location of the IEC, we will have 53 locations. We will have also a computer at those locations. The voters lists are going to be uploaded in these locations. We will have an employee that is very much committed to the safety conditions and terms. And if a voter comes to make sure of his name, the staff or this employee is going to examine his ID and his information, and if any objection is going to be there, it's going to be submitted by the computers that are provided in 53 locations in 23 constituencies. After that, after making sure of the voter's data, if he wants to object or to appeal, we would have a position in the civil status directorate at which this voter can situation or with the structure that the objects are going on the streets. Some objections are going to be delivered for this state report, and we will
2019 كان في عندنا عدد مراكز تقريبا 1800
about 1,800 443 in these centers. We had he mentioned a number of voting chambers or voting rooms. I couldn't get a number for this purpose, and for us to be able to have such huge numbers, we had to have a field surveys for the centers that we accredited by some field teams. They moved in different areas of the kingdom. They surveyed like about 4,000 schools in 24 education directorates, and we identified those centers. We took the centers that were used in 2016, and we tried to have those who have like 500 meters from each other. And now there's a preliminary distribution for the voters on these centers. In each voting center, we will have ballot boxes to have 500 voters in each center. If we look at the percentage of voting, some of the areas, we are expecting not more than 500 voters, so they could be even less. All of this is taken into consideration so that we would be able to avoid crowdedness at the voting centers. We are in 2016, we had like 1,500 in each center, but sometimes we could have 3,000. It depends on the nature and the location of the center. Is it in the middle of a capital, in the middle of a crowded city, or in rural areas? So all of these things we took into consideration so we can distribute the voters and take into consideration the pandemic issues. We move to the other stage. After that, we have a lot of staff working with us in those centers. We have the employees of the committees, the supporting teams also. There are about 60,000 if we are only talking about the personnel working in the electoral process. We distributed them into categories and about 8 or 9 categories. And after distributing them into categories, we train them. And after distributing them into categories, depending on the nature of each stage of the electoral process, and we delivered the training materials into videos. They were we took some videos, some footages, and it's going to be uploaded on the website of the IEC so that the staff or the employees can use them from their own homes. They can have a look at it if they are working on the tabulation, for example. They would log in into the topic of the tabulation, for example, or the voters registration, and they would go directly to the material pertaining this issue and have a look at it and take an idea about it. If they are working on auditing, they can go directly to the materials delivered about this topic and to see what are the details and what is the training about this. So we could lessen the pressure of this staff and to have less training in rooms and to maintain as much as we can the safety and the health of our workers. This doesn't mean that at one stage, especially for the committees working on the auditing and counting and auditing, that they need to be trained on auditing and counting. And we took into consideration the space we need in the training rooms. In all the training centers that we used previously, we tried to have larger spaces this time. And in each training session, we had like 30 trainees, and now we are going to have like 18 of them. And we kept the social distancing, and there's a training kit for each trainer. And in each training kit, we provided the safety procedures, like we provided the trainer with the gloves, with masks, so that we would provide a healthy, safe training environment. And this means that we needed to have more hours for the training. So if we are talking about 180, this means that we may need 30,000. If we are going to have 30,000 of our employees, this means that we will need more training hours. And we previously we had 6 people working in those training, working in the voting centers. So we tried to decrease the numbers, and we trained them. I'm talking about some volunteers also. University students at their first year, at the second year, and they are young people. We focus on them so that they would be our partners in this process. So in this process, we are going to have 10,000. Those are other than those working in the auditing centers, which would be 1,500. In addition to those working at the doors of the voting centers and at the doors of the voting rooms. So we need also to train them. And we said that we needed to increase the number of trainees and to increase numbers of hours of trainings and numbers of training sessions. And this means we need also to have more trainers, or the trainers to work more hours. All the measures pertaining to these safety measures, they were added to the manuals, procedural manuals. We said that we have training manuals, and also we reviewed those, and we added to them the safety procedures to be taken, and they were also added to the videos. We stressed and we focused on those, and we had a detailed manual, so nobody would exert their own efforts to be safe. They need to review, and they need to be committed to the manuals of safety. And now I want to talk about a very important stage, which is nomination. The nomination stage or phase is the other phase after enabling or after registering all the voters. Now we talk about the nomination phase. Previously, we had nomination in 23 constituencies. We have 23 committees, and according to the electoral law, the applications for the nomination applications need to be in I think you said 13 weeks. So this means that we are going to have the nomination lists, and in the constituencies, in each constituency, the candidates are going to be 11. So if we have a simple calculation, if we have candidates that are going to be nominated, so this means at the first day, for a candidate to have the first number, because we all know that lists, all the candidates may want to be number 1 in the list or number 2 in the list. So we always have such a problem that we have overcrowdedness in the first day to apply for candidacy. And candidates, all of them, come at once for the head of the committee, and they apply for candidacy because our lists are not closed. So they need to apply for candidacy for the list, and within these lists. So we amended our regulations for the candidacy, so we would have less crowdedness in the first day, and we said that to not to be overwhelmed by the lists that are going to be applied or that are going to be submitted in the first day. We would ask the candidates that at the last day they need to be present at the last day, and we will have a lottery, and whoever has the number one is going to be number one in the list. Whoever is going to have number two is going to be number two in the list. And this means that each list needs to have their own deputy. Now, as far as we got rid of overcrowdedness and people that want to be number one in the lists, so this means that the head of the committee in each constituency would be able to have the procedures or the measures for any objections. So if any objection come, he can put a date, like for example, the candidate of a new list need to be present at that day or that time, and they will be there, or the deputy of this list is going to be there without having people crowded. And they would all have the chance to object, and they can go back to the committees and to have responses for their objections in a safe environment. Of course, candidacy is very much linked with the electoral campaigns, and all of these procedures we are talking about are under the control of IEC, so we can organize the entrance of the beneficiaries of these services, whether candidates, whether objectors. And so now we move to the other stage, which is the relationship between the candidate and his or her voter. And by this, the stage of candidacy starts with the applications for candidacy in 23 constituencies. So the electoral campaigning or propaganda, we also tackled it, so we can control the advertisements for candidacy for the candidates and the electoral campaigns. We had some rules and measures, like for example, previously they used to deliver or to provide some food, some beverages in the campaign. Mr. Hisham is laughing because he knows that in each campaign, this means that we have drinks, we have food. So we had to get some directions and instructions so we can control the crowdedness within these campaigns. And we provided a model for the electoral campaigns. So we started with identifying the space for the electoral campaigns. And in addition to that, we need also to identify number of people in those gatherings, and we prevented providing any food, kunafa, any sweets, any desserts. It's totally forbidden. If they want to provide some water, they need to be within boxes of cartoon. And they need all to be disposable, not to be reused. And we will have a model. We also mentioned that he needs to provide sanitizers, and everybody working at that location, they need to be committed with the safety measures like gloves, wearing masks. So we talked about all these details that need to be provided in the electoral campaigning location. I mentioned that food is forbidden, and they need also to take into consideration social distancing. Just like His Excellency, the president mentioned, the social distancing may be different from one culture to another, but what we mean here by social distancing, that they need to keep a space between one another. So they need to sign on a paper by which they commit to these instructions, and it mentions all the details pertaining to the space, the area of the campaigning location, because this application is going to be studied by the head or the president of the constituency to prove it, to prove this pledge. And he needs to commit all the instructions and all the rules giving for each constituency. After the electoral campaigning, we move to some details pertaining to the E-Day. And this has a specific details because in Jordan, we are going to open the voting centers at 7 a.m. According to the law, up to 7 p.m. But according due to the pandemic conditions, we can extend the voting hours. So automatically, it's going to be from 7 a.m. up to 9 p.m. So we would avoid any citizen saying that I cannot move between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. In cities, in the capital, most of the people come after work, like in the afternoon or at evening, while in rural areas they prefer to go early in the morning. So things differ from one area to another. That's why we extended the time to avoid the overcrowdedness. Like if, for example, any citizen went to a voting center and it was at rush hour, he can come back again at some other time. This is pertaining to some of the administration measures or the timing for voting. Now, the auditing committee and their kits and their necessities, we reviewed them. We reviewed all its details, and we also added to them the hygiene necessities, the gloves, the masks. And after decreasing the number working, we also worked on the design of or the layout of the voting room. It needs also to take into consideration the social distancing. The observers will have a specific area. We have some chairs between each chair and another, 1 meter or 1.5 meters. It depends on the space of each room, and we will give some room also for the international observers, with the consideration number of people that need to be in that room. And we have lists. And those lists, we give authority for the head of the committee to control people inside those rooms. Like, for example, if number of lists are a lot, and we also have observers, so the mechanism of observing needs to be organized. So we control or we maintain the safety of people in that center or in that voting room station. We will have also, volunteers at the door of the voting stations or the voting center. We won't allow anybody not wearing the mask or the gloves. So initially, the voter needs to wear the mask. After entering the center, his identity is going to be verified by an employee, and he's going to be directed to the station. And when he reaches that station, we will have a volunteer at the door of that voting station. There should be some distancing. We will have lines with the clear colors at the door, at the gates also of the center, and also the door of the voting station. Of course, priority is given for women, pregnant women, elderly people, disabled people. the volunteer at the doors. He's authorized. We amended some of the instructions at the E-Day so that we would enable the volunteer at the door of the voting station to make sure that the voters wearing the mask, the volunteer is going to provide him with gloves, and he's going also to be provided with a pen. Each voter that is going to reach the voting station is going to be given a pen, and after that, it's going to be taken away from him, or he's going to throw it, so that we make sure it's not going to be used by another voter. And to accelerate the verification of the voter, we are going to use a technique that we are currently studying. It's similar to the barcode. It's the voting ID. It's going to be verified by scanning the barcode, and by this we are going to accelerate this process. So directly, the barcode is going to read the electoral ID. It's going to be uploaded on the screen, and it's going to be shown on the screen. So by this, we verify the identity of the voter, and he's going to be directed immediately to the head of the committee, and he's going to be provided with the booklet of the voting, with the instructions, with the list, and he's going to vote later on the ballot, and to put the ballot in the box, and at the door of, while he's leaving the voting station, he's going to take off his gloves and to put it in a bin that is specified for the use of gloves, and then he's going to be sprayed. His hands are going to be sprayed, because in 2016 we used to use the indelible ink, but now we are going to spray the finger of the voter in a specific technique. In a different technique, so that we would avoid taking off the gloves before leaving the station. These are the details that I could cover within the time given to me. I'm sure that you are experts and you may know a lot of these details, but with your questions, you may direct me to any other information that you may need. Thank you. Thanks a lot, Mr. Nasser. There are still some questions directed to you, and you will have other chance to talk about some other details. But we thank you a lot for the details given by you, whether about the registrations, whether about the lists, about candidacy, objections, or campaigning, and also how to respond to some of the violations, and also about the process of voting and auditing. Thank you for your intervention, and we reiterate that you can put your questions in this webinar, and some of the questions are going to be answered by Mr. Nasser after listening to the other intervention pertaining to the voters' information and raising the awareness of the voter. So we move to Mr. Sharaf Abu Roman. The floor is yours. Please go ahead. Please unmute yourself. Thank you. Your eminence, the moderator of this session, and before I start, I would like to say to Mr. Hisham Abukhail, he had some questions about Kunafa. Personally, I'm against preventing Kunafa, but this is what we have to do. We are not dealing with normal conditions here in the pandemic. Like my colleague mentioned, we had to amend some of the instructions to maintain the safety. And also we had to build our capacity to deal with this pandemic. and to contribute to the voters' information and raising the awareness of voters and citizens. In this respect, the IEC put all its materials into online materials, and we also provided a manual that is uploaded on the website of the IAC. It deals with different stages of the electoral process. It started with registration, and also talking about the mechanisms of voting, and it was provided also, it was accompanied also with some videos, not to forget the videos with the sign language. And so we have also some materials that are going to be distributed and disseminated by different media channels. The IEC provided some billboards that are going to be distributed in the streets, and also we provided or we issued some of the brochures, and this is also a mechanism that we can use, the raising awareness brochures that were also used in 2016. In 2016 and 2017, we used the technique of door-to-door in distributing those brochures, so we could reach as much as we can of the citizens. But in this year, we will have kind of a booth designed in a nice way in front of all the malls and also in front of all the public institutions. So the person is who is going to distribute those brochures is going to be an employee from the IEC volunteering to deliver those brochures in a way, wearing gloves, and he's going to hold it from the bottom of it from one angle, and the citizens are going to receive them from the other side. And we use this technique, and our employees were trained to use this technique to avoid as much as we can of the direct contact. We also delivered some of the messages through the SMS. Some of those materials were talking about the voting centers, and we also use the social media for delivering such materials. We also developed the website of the IAC, so that it will be easy for the citizen to log in this site and to know about all the materials. And we were keen to deliver all of our materials on this website, and I encourage everybody to visit this website, www.iec.gov. There were some questions on the chat box asking about those videos. You can find them on this website. Also, I want to talk about a number of Zoom webinars that were conducted by IEC starting from the time of the pandemic until now, July. We had, he mentioned a number I couldn't get about Zoom webinars. We targeted the employees of the IAC, we targeted some of the lawyers, we targeted some of the potential candidates, and we had 1,700 of males, and he mentioned another number for females. I couldn't get those webinars. Talked about some procedures at the pandemic time. What are the instructions that need to be followed? And also he talks about a very important process that he started this year, which is training the journalists or media personnel. And maybe we had such a discussion that can we train media people or personnel. So we had to use some of the terminologies that with which we can achieve or our goals, which is to disseminate all our procedures and processes from A to Z, and also to unify all our terminologies, like the difference between a potential voter and an actual voter, ناخب and مقترع in Arabic. And all of this was published in a booklet, and it was also published on the website of the IEC, and the personnel. Every citizen can have a password and a username to log in into this website, and we wanted to have the media as a supporter for us. So that's why we developed such mechanisms and tools in this pandemic area. And in addition to that, we had a specific media plan during the elections, which goes in line with the plans, with the procedural plans, and they are going to be more intense in this period because the media discourse or need to reach every household, need to reach every citizen. We've developed some specific directions that need to be followed at the pandemic time, and some instructions pertaining to social distancing and safety procedures, and also the extension of time at the E-Day, and also some instructions and some advice pertaining not to go vote at the peak hour, and some other necessary procedures. I don't like to take longer, but as for the communication with the IEC and between the IEC and the observers, national observers, local observers, and international observers, we have number of Zooms conducted by the president of IEC, and a lot of media institutions. Like if we have a specific media institution, we meet with all of the personnel of that institution, starting with the director and all their employees. We have a Zoom meeting, and our president listen to them and respond to all their inquiries and questions, to be followed by a meeting by our employees with that institution. So we include every person in that institution, starting from the top of their pyramid and to the bottom. I have one thing also. One thing that I feel sorry for. In 2016, in 2017, we had a play that had a political aspect, and it tackled a lot of negative issues that could be affiliated with the electoral process, like, for example, the black money, or the political money, or neglecting women, or putting pressure over her to vote for somebody. Such issues we tackled in a play that was presented in a lot of governorates. But this time we are going to conduct such play only once at the theater of the IEC, and it's going to be presented, and it's going to be uploaded on the website of the IEC, and also it's going to be uploaded on YouTube, so you can log into it and watch it. Thank you, Mr. Sharaf, for all this information and those details. because you developed a lot of training materials and you videotaped them and you uploaded them on the website of IEC, and you conducted a lot of Zoom meetings and you put a lot of videos on YouTube, and you also maintained the previous techniques like the brochures and leaflets, in addition to a lot of added healthy procedures. I'm sure that you have a lot of other details, like did you engage the stakeholders in those instructions that you delivered pertaining Corona? Did you also pilot those procedures, and did you reflect it in the field? Also, how far did you engage the disabled people? How did you deal with the disabled people pertaining informing them? Also, other questions that you can have the answers for after Mr. Nasser responds to some of the questions. There were also some questions pertaining the amended procedures, and that request was from Mr. Isam, also to make sure of the amendments that you delivered. How can you make sure that people are people abided by those amendments and instructions? And there was also an inquiry or question pertaining the appeals and the procedures for appeals, and how do you apply all the procedures in this respect? And someone was asking also about the role of Ministry of Health. And there's also a question about the indelible ink, and there was a question about the spray, and why do we use the same naming for it? And there was also a question about number of people at the polling stations or voting centers. And I welcome Mr. Yunus Najir Anqub, who delivered a lot of questions to you. You can even answer him in a private, maybe later on, because he has a lot of detailed questions also pertaining to the participation of women, participation of women according to the geographic areas, and how could COVID-19 affect their participation. There's a question from Ms. Diana. She thanks you for your interventions, and she's asking about the provision of masks and gloves. These are a number of questions, and we can have other interactive questions. So I leave the floor for you to respond to those questions. Yes, Mr. Nasser, the floor is yours. Thank you again, Ms. Hasna. Actually, I would like to thank all the people who delivered their questions pertaining how to make sure that people would abide. At IEC, we are considered a judicial officer, meaning people working on the management of this process are considered judicial officers. So according to the law, there's a template that is prepared for this respect, and it can be submitted to the judge or to the court, and they have the authority, or the IEC have the authority to control these procedures, and any violation is considered a legal violation. And this is derived from the Constitution, and because the Constitution organized, or the Constitution mentions the electoral law as an authority to be given to the administrators. We have also arms or partners in the field. We have committees that are supporters for the IEC. We have an officer that follow up on the electoral campaigning in each constituency. We have an employee that's responsible to follow up on this issue, and he has a staff, or she has a staff. The staff has some tools, some phones, and they can communicate with the IEC. So they, at the end, provide us with a report for everything they see, any violation they see, and they have the authority to communicate with the authorized people to follow up on any violation, like, for example, if it is a billboard, or if it is some flags, or any gathering of people. So we have this team to follow up each constituency and to follow up the campaigning, electoral campaigning in each constituency. And as for the appeals, Mr. Khaled, I said that the appeals in Jordan are two kinds. One is about the data of the citizen himself, like, for example, if his name is wrong in the voters lists, or if he's not listed, or if he needs to change his constituency, or like, if, for example, if he's the citizen of one constituency, like Cherkessian, and he's not listed in the constituency that he has the right to vote at, he can refer to the civil status department and to amend, like if he's if he's a Christian and his name is listed in one constituency that doesn't have a chair for Christian candidates, so he can appeal and he can object at the civil status. Now, if I'm a citizen of Irbid, he has the right if his name is not listed in the constituencies of Irbid. So these details are tackled by the civil status department within some clear procedures that we worked with the civil status department pertaining these issues. We have offices that receive the appeals of citizens, and we extended the working times for these offices, and the procedures of social distances, of wearing gloves, masks, all these issues or procedures were taken into consideration. After appealing, this citizen is not obliged to wait for a lot of time or to refer again to those offices. They can receive the they can have the responses electronically. The voters' lists are distributed in 23 of the 23 constituencies are published on the website of the IEC. So if they want to amend any of their data, it's going to be done quickly if they submit it also on the website of the IEC. Now, appealing or objecting on others, it's going to follow the same procedure or the same technique, but they need to go to the constituency that they are registered in. In the constituency, we are going to have more than one committee working within a safe environment. There's a social distancing between each committee and another, so they would receive such appeals. By the way, when we reviewed the appeals or the objections on others, they were only 130 at the 2016. So we are going to follow same mechanism to define the number of people in each location. We identified people that are authorized to be in each location. If we are talking about the voting centers and the voting stations, we identify them because for each list we have a deputy. And other than the deputies, we are going to have the observers. So when we survey the voting stations and the voting centers, we are going to have in mind the space, and each room is not going to be more than 25 square meters. We have a lot of we have a lot of schools that meet this criteria, but we still have some other schools that don't. If we have some schools that have rooms with more than 25 square meters, we are going to have more people at those rooms. But if not, we need to organize people that need to exist or need to be present in these rooms. There was a question about the distribution of voters. First, we prepare the lists of voters in advance. We have the clear voter lists, and we receive the objections on these lists. So in the beginning, it's going to be a preliminary, and then it's going to be final. We will have a law or a bylaw that tackles the issue of receiving the objections of these lists. Like, for example, if my name is at the school of Sukaina, ballot box number 1, it's impossible that my name is going to be shown in any other center. So in advance, I would know that I'm going to go to that center. Now, the distribution of the voters is controlled by the numbers of voters. We had our statistics from 2016. So our decision would be based on a proper information. We took the distribution of voters from 2016, and we had approximate number plus minus, and we estimated that we are going to have 400 to 500 voters in each center, and in each center we are going to have 4 to 5 boxes. So the percentage of the percentage of voters in cities is going to be less, I think he said, from the rural areas. So we based our decision from the information we had from 2016, and we had some reflections, and we took the percentage of voting and auditing, and we based our decision that we are going to have 10,000 ballot boxes. There was a question from Ms. Dina about providing masks in addition to gloves. We tried our best to provide as much as we can of the safety necessity that needed a lot of or a huge budget. So if I wanted to identify the staff that I'm going to need, and also to review my logistics, and I wanted to estimate the health necessities or safety necessities that we are going to need. As much as we could, we are going to provide a kit or a safety kit that contains all safety tools or all safety necessities. So what is left for the voter is that when they go to the voting or to the polling center, they need to be provided or they need to have their own masks and gloves. So this culture of mask is already there in Jordan, and it is affordable for all people, whoever go to malls, to shops, to public facilities. According to the defense law, they need to wear their masks and gloves. So since it is provided for everybody, this means that the voter is going to be at the polling station having his or her own mask and gloves. And we need only to give them the pen. Mr. I couldn't get the name. As for the indelible ink, the criteria or the qualifications are going to be the same. Silver nitrate, it's the same specification about the indelible age. It's not going to be different, but instead of putting the finger, the voter's finger in the ink, it's going to be sprayed on his finger. I would be ready for any more questions. Yes, there will be another question because you talked about the budget. So we received a question about the budget. any added procedures due to COVID-19? Did it burden or did it add on the burden of a budget? And also there was a question about why not having 2 days for the electoral day instead of one, to keep the social distancing and to avoid the overcrowdedness. Another question about the polling center, because you talked about some mechanisms to change numbers of vote or the decrease the numbers of polling centers. So wouldn't this increase the migration from some areas to others? And there was also another question about the national or local observers and international observers. We may give the chance for Mr. Sharafuddin to answer these questions. So after that, we may go back to you, Mr. Nasser, to answer the questions directed to you. There was another question about the quality of the indelible ink or the normal ink. What did you use for the ink? We can give the chance now for Mr. Sharafuddin, and maybe later on you can refer back to those questions. Thank you. I noticed a lot of questions, and I think some of them are directed to me. The first question is about the partnership in issuing the instructions pertaining this issue. The IAC identified its stakeholders. We have electoral stakeholders, the voter in general, but also the political parties, the observers, the academic institutions, the public, and so on. Now, the instructions for media and journalists were delivered through some deputies, and we had a lot of the meetings, out of which we agreed on some of the instructions, and also we had some evaluation stage with them. As for the instructions for the local observers, also those directions was a fruit of number of meetings, and lately we amended the instructions that were followed in 2016, and we had to have a new directions to be in line with the international observers. And we also communicated with the local observers and international observers. As for our materials, they all have the sign language. And as for the visual materials, so we have a website. The visual impaired people, we also have some other materials to be presented in a Braille language. As for the international observation missions, and this is a very important portfolio. Of course, we are very much eager to maintain the integrity of the electoral process after delivering all of these materials. We have an evaluation, and we have reports to be delivered about our stance. After those reports, or the reports of these missions or observation committees, we review their reports, and if we have any comments, any observation, any notice, we discuss it with them. But in general, since I've been following this process in 2013, and after that we had the elections of 2016, and now we are going to have the elections of 2020, the international missions usually didn't intervene in the Jordanian national directions, and they were good in general in their feedback. The local reports were mentioning that in each electoral cycle there's a progress made by the IEC in managing this process, but maybe they tackled some details, like, for example, a voter didn't deliver his ID, or some observations about the indelible ink. And if their recommendations, if their comments are proper and correct, we acknowledge them, and accordingly we amend a lot of our procedures. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sharaf. Now it's time for Mr. Nasser for a second round of the questions. Two questions that were delivered quickly. A question about the role of the safety necessities, and also another questions about legal mechanisms that may enhance the executive procedures, and also another questions about the other countries that conducted their elections and had some health procedures. Maybe you have an idea in previous Zoom meetings. So do you have any idea about other countries' procedures? Thank you again. In the beginning, allow me to talk about the role of the Ministry of Health. I would like to mention one important thing here. IEC, we are a constitutional authority or commission. So IEC was established according to a legal or a constitutional item. So there's no authority that manage the electoral process that has the same authority as IEC. So there's none in Jordan, no authority can manage elections in Jordan that is superior to IEC. We are the commission that manage and plan for the electoral process. Maybe one of our main indicators that everybody knows about is preparing for the budget. So we prepare the budget and we submit it to the cabinet, and they review it and they prepare it, and it's not discussed. So our role is to submit the budget, and it's going to be included within the public budget. So the issue of engaging the Ministry of Health on any other institution, this is not possible because we need to be able to manage our electoral process and to enable our staff to work in a healthy environment. So we need to have our budget, we need to assess it, and we need to submit it. Prior to Corona, we had a lot of procedures, so we amended them after Corona. And yes, there is extra burden. We estimated a budget, and after coronavirus, and due to having extra procedures, due to increasing number of ballot boxes, due to having some safety and health necessities, this meant that we have extra burden, but this needs to be maintained following the instructions of His Majesty the King instructions. The issue of having 2 electoral days, this has 2 parts if you want to talk about this. The first part, I think it's related to a legislative framework. Since I opened a ballot box, this means that I need to close it. This is related to the integrity and the honesty and keeping the safety of those boxes. Since I opened this ballot box at the opening of the E-Day, this means that I need to close it at the end of the E-Day. And also when the committee finish their work, they need to take their minutes to be machines. And when I close those ballot boxes, I cannot move them. So logistically speaking, it's a complicated process. And we need also to have a number of observers to make sure of the integrity of the process. And if I'm going to close at 7, if not extended to 9 p.m., so that means different stages of the process. Also, from the other part, it's about it's related to the voters registry, and the voters registry is prepared according to the residency of the citizens, and this was allowed by the law that we can have some changes, but within a specific period, which is 14 days. And we call this period the period or the stage of the preparing the primary lists, and we give this time so that we can finalize the lists and amending any information about any voter according to the objections that could be made. The decisions of the Commission, just like I said, our decisions are based on the law. So once it is issued in the Gazette, this means that it is considered legal. So according to the law of the Commission is authorized to issue some procedures, some regulations to manage the electoral process in different stages. This is one thing. Then the electoral law enabled the IEC to do all the processes needed to manage the electoral process, like, for example, the voters' lists. For example, the disabled people, how to manage their, or how to organize their voting. So maybe by this, we issue the executive procedures, the instructions issued by the IEC is parallel to instructions delivered by the cabinet. So these instructions are not delivered or issued by the cabinet, but it's delivered by the IEC to maintain our ability and our authority to manage the electoral process. Statistics about the late elections that were conducted. Actually, I don't have such information. I would be happy to provide you with, but maybe this needs, or this is worth discussing or looking for, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Nasser. Mr. Sharaf, if you have any comments. After you delivered your first answers, or if we have any further questions that were not answered pertaining the simulation meetings. I think the question about voting process, I left it to my colleague, Mr. Nasser. But if you're talking about some meetings with the journalists in this period or in this stage, we are almost having daily meetings with the journalists, and we trained them before Corona. We met them and we delivered the training in 12 governorates. Now, in the coronavirus time, we are going to deal on daily basis with the journalists, and we are going to train them. Tomorrow we are going to have a meeting with Petra, and maybe my colleague doesn't know that, but we work on training all the media people and journalists to cover the electoral process. And we are also going to have a video that is going to be delivered for the Jordanian citizens, and it talks about the voting process and delivering their ballot, and how is this procedure is going to be conducted to maintain their safety. I think, Mr. Nasser, you need to intervene, but please in 1 minute. Thank you. But just about the simulation meeting, just like Mr. Sharaf talked a while ago, we are about to deliver a manual that talks about the mechanisms of voting at the E-Day. And this simulation shows that we have number of voters, and also we have our staff, and they have all their tools, all their machines, all their requirements. And this is going to be a simulation of a voting process to be shown for the citizens. This is in 1 minute. Thank you, and thank you for respecting the time. Actually, it was an interesting meeting. People from Iraq, Somalia, Mauritania, Tunisia. I hope I didn't forget any of the participants or any countries. It was a great meeting. We reached its end. We have we had the questions that were delivered, and the answers given to them. It's going to be delivered together with this webinar through the link delivered to you, so that you can benefit more. And we can also log in into the website of IEC to benefit from the materials, from the videos, and from the simulation that they deliver there. Thank you. We have some of the messages thanking you for your great interventions. For those who didn't still have their breakfast, I wish you have a good breakfast, and hopefully we meet in other webinars. Thank you.